We come together in community, supporting and encouraging each other on our spiritual journeys, affirming the importance not only of tolerance, but of compassion, acceptance, and open-mindedness. Welcome to this good place, Tapestry, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Our minister, the Reverend Kent Doss, is not in the pulpit today. He'll return next Sunday. Today we have two of our own Tapestry members, Greg Klein and Angela Jansen, talking about their experience of General Assembly. Connie Purcell was originally scheduled to be one of the speakers this morning, but we've learned she's unexpectedly in the hospital. We wish her a speedy recovery. We are a welcoming congregation, and we extend a warm greeting to any newcomers. We invite those of you who may be visiting for the first or second time, if you are comfortable doing so, to please stand and introduce yourselves so that we might get to know you. Do we have any newcomers visiting for the first or second time who would like to introduce themselves? Good morning.
Good morning. And I'm Jean Whitney, and I'm pleased to be here and have a chance to meet you all.
Welcome.
I'd like to introduce my daughter Heather Hinton and our grandson Isaac, who are visiting from Massachusetts.
Welcome. Thank you for being willing to introduce yourselves. We heartily welcome everyone, so now please extend a warm welcome to old friends, old and new friends sitting near you. Now Julia will light our flaming chalice, the central symbol of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. Each morning, we must hold out the chalice of our being to receive, to carry, and to give back. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to the community, and to each other. Please join me in saying our covenant, followed by our song of affirmation. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is its law. Our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning. Good morning. Let there be pictures.
You're not going to say anything.
Not yet. It's the president of the UUA, Peter Morales. That was in the banner parade. There's Grayson. Yeah. Cornell West. All right, so today we hope to share with you a little of what it's like to be at the UUA General Assembly. And you just saw all 15 of us from Tapestry who were able to make it this year to Portland. Reverend Dr. Cornell West was the keynote speaker this year. He's one of the few public figures who really does walk the walk. He can't nor doesn't care to count how many times he's been arrested for noble causes, many causes. He calls them struggles for integrity, for what it means to be a human. You can hear his whole speech on the UUA.org website. Speaking in front of about 5,000 UUs, he said, "My God, there's a sweet spirit in this place. What a magnificent gathering you UUs have brought to Portland." So now, if you're willing and able, please stand and sing hymn 1024, When the Spirit Says Do.
Good morning. I'm Laura Jackson, and this is the time in our service when we take time to recognize the joys and sorrows in our congregation. We have a few today. I'm going to announce one from Penny and Dave Kinnear, who are excited to have their daughter, Heather, and grandson, Isaac, visiting from Massachusetts, and we're excited to have you with us today. Thank you. And then from Julia Rampone, we have more information about Connie. Connie had an unplanned surgery on Friday evening. Sounds like late Friday evening. And everything went well, and she's expected to go home today. She'll probably be back to work later this week, so I'm sure she'd love to hear from you when she's back from the hospital. And then, as some of you know, Dick Huddlestone has not been well recently, for the past few years. But this past week, that decline has progressed much more rapidly. Hospice care providers have said that Dick will probably not live much more than a few more days. So Lois is staying close by and is supported by their kids. However, she's not ready for phone calls or visits at this time. Your thoughts and prayers are always welcome. So let us join in the congregational response. For your joys, we join you in celebration. For your sorrows and concerns, may you feel our compassion. For all that is spoken and unspoken, may the caring of our beloved community sustain you. Oh, and let me welcome up Caitlin Riva for the Time for All Ages.
Yeah.
I've heard that story before.
This pumpkin soup you've heard before?
Yeah. I didn't either.
Good morning.
And then we're going to hear Daisy Head Daisy.
Yes, we are going to hear Daisy Head Maisie when we go to class.
Daisy Head Maisie.
She's very excited. But this morning we're going to read a book called Pumpkin Soup. So what month is it right now? Do you guys know? It's Christmas. We are pretending it's Christmas today. What did we celebrate yesterday? The 4th of July, because it's July. That's what month we're in. It's July. And for July, we're going to talk about harmony, which this book's about working together. That working together is better than doing stuff by yourself. All right?
Yeah, we did a home working together project by drawing pictures.
Excellent.
Yeah, but we were making...
All right, you guys ready? We're going to listen. Deep in the woods, there's an old white cabin with pumpkins in the garden. There's a good smell of soup, and at night, with luck, you might see a bagpiping cat through the window, and a squirrel with a banjo, and a small singing duck. Pumpkin soup, the best you ever tasted. Made by the cat who slices up the pumpkin, made by the squirrel who stirs in the water, made by the duck who scoops up a pipkin of salt and tips in just enough. They slurp their soup, they play their song, they pop off to bed in a quilt stitched together by the cat, embroidered by the squirrel, and filled with fine feathers from the duck. And it's peaceful in the old white cabin. Everyone has his own job to do. Everyone is happy, or so it seems. All right, the duck has his eyes open over here, so let's see what he's up to. But one morning, the duck woke up early. He tiptoed into the kitchen and smiled at the squirrel's special spoon. "Wouldn't it be fine," he murmured, "if I could be the head cook?" He drew up a stool, hopped on top, and reached until his beak just touched the tip of the spoon. Kerplunk! Down it clattered. Then the duck trotted back to the bedroom, held up the spoon, and said, "Today, it's my turn to stir the soup." "That's mine," squeaked the squirrel. "Stirring is my job. Give that back." "You're much too small," snapped the cat. "We'll cook the way we always have." But the duck held on tight until the squirrel tugged with all his might, and whoops, the spoon spun through the air and bopped the cat on the head. Then there was trouble, a horrible squabble, a row, a racket, a rumpus in the old white cabin. "I'm not staying here," wailed the duck. "You never let me help with anything." And he packed up a wheelbarrow, put on his hat, and waddled away. "You'll be back," stormed the cat, "after we've cleaned up." And the squirrel shook his spoon in the air, but the duck didn't come back. Not for breakfast, not even for lunch. "I'll find him," scoffed the cat. "He'll be hiding outside. I bet he's in the pumpkin patch." But the duck was not in the pumpkin patch. They could not find him anywhere. So they waited all that long afternoon. The cat watched the door, the squirrel paced the floor. "That duck will be sorry when he comes home," they muttered. But the duck didn't come home, not even when it was time for soup. The soup wasn't tasty. They'd made it too salty. Remember, it's duck's job to put the salt in the soup. They didn't feel hungry anyway. They both sobbed over supper, and their tears dripped into the soup and made it even saltier. "We should have let him stir the soup," sniffled the squirrel. "He was only trying to help," wept the cat. "Let's go out and look for him." The cat and the squirrel were scared as they wandered down the path in the dark, dark woods. They feared for the duck all alone with the trees and the foxes and the wolves and the witches and the bears. But they couldn't find him. On and on they trudged until they reached the edge of a steep, steep cliff. "Maybe he fell down that," wailed the cat. "I'll save him," squeaked the squirrel, and he scrambled down on a long, shapy rope. He searched all around on the ground, but he couldn't find the duck. Then the cat whispered in a sad little voice, "Duck might have found some better friends." "He might," sighed the squirrel, "friends who let him help." And the more they thought about it as they plodded back, the more they were sure they were right. But when they were almost home, they saw light shining from the old white cabin. "It's Duck!" they shrieked as they burst through the door. And the duck was so happy to see them. He was also very hungry, and though it was late, they thought they would all make, what are they going to make?
Pumpkin pie!
Some pumpkin soup. When the duck stirred, the cat and the squirrel didn't say a word. And you can back there, he stirs quite ferociously. Not even when the duck stirred the soup so fast that it slopped right out of the pot. Not even when the pot got burnt. Then the duck showed the squirrel how to measure out the salt, and the soup was still the best you ever tasted. So once again, it was peaceful in the old white cabin until the duck said, "I think I'll play the bagpipes now." So that is our story of pumpkin soup and working together. And now it's time to go to class. Thank you.
Now, did we get to hear Dave?
I am back. I am a poor substitution for Connie. So Connie and Greg were originally going to do this, and Connie's going to talk about the workshops, and Greg was going to talk about the voting, because Connie, Greg, and I were all delegates. And so what I thought I would do is to kind of tell you a little bit about my impression of GA, and then we'll go into, so this is just me talking with my notebook, and then Greg's got very organized slides talking about the votes.
Of course.
So, this was my second GA. My first one was in Phoenix, and it was my first one as a delegate. And it was exhausting and exhilarating and amazing. And as a delegate, there are 3 to 5 hours of business every day. And if you're not a delegate, you don't really have to attend that. So in Phoenix, I kind of wandered in and out. And then this year, because we were delegates, we were there, and there's a worship service every morning. And they're singing, and I think it's a bit magical. I do. I'd like to be a delegate again. But it was exhausting. And people care so much. And Greg will talk about this a little bit more, but I don't know, probably many of you have been to GA before, but it's set up, it's a business meeting. And then there are chaplains that are walking around. So if you feel, because sometimes we talk about trigger issues, so there are chaplains. So if you feel triggered by something that was said, there's always someone, and they wear hats that say chaplain. And so if you feel upset or if you need to talk to someone, they're just wandering the convention hall. So like I've been to a lot of science conventions, and so it was a little bit of a twist on that.
Yeah.
And then there's the Right Relations Committee, and they are there so that if you have an altercation with someone and you feel like someone disrespected you or you're having a real problem, then you talk to these people that are the Right Relations Committee. And it's interesting because they come out before every business session, and they talk about things that they were approached about, just to kind of share. And I think Cornel West said that, here's where we get to practice being human.
Right.
right, in these sessions, because it's business, but we're also coming together as Unitarian Universalists.
And even our moderator had one instance.
Yeah, so, and when I did it before, Ginny was the moderator, and she's amazing. I'm friends with her on Facebook. She's incredible. She did it for 8 years, and it was pretty seamless. And now we've got a moderator, and it's his second year, and he's not as polished, and he forgot to call for seconds, like, okay, are we going to vote? Who wants to? Okay, and then he'd start, and then people would run up to the procedure microphone, right? Because we're all very Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure, and they'd be like, no, you didn't get a second. And so I'll just tell you about kind of two of the right relations that was interesting is, so then he got a little defensive, and he'd kind of like roll his eyes and like, oh yeah, do we want a second? And so someone approached the Right Relations Committee about him and said that he was being disrespectful. I have to say, I felt he was being a bit disrespectful, but you could see he was really flustered, right? And there were, over 4,500 people, about 1,800 delegates, right? And so that's a lot of people who are hanging on to everything you say. So the Right Relations Committee came out one morning and said, we were approached about Jim, and we had a talk with him. And he said, he was very gracious, and he got up and he said, I'm learning, and we're all learning together how to be UUs and how to work together. And every time I have an opportunity to learn how to be better, I appreciate it. And it was really beautiful. He handled it really beautifully. And then the next morning, the Right Relations came out and said that people thought that they were beating up on Jim too much. So it's really, so it's so cool. So it's, to kind of try to figure out how to, and nobody can behave perfectly, right? But we're all trying to be the perfect people we can be. And the interesting thing is, in Phoenix, the Right Relations Committee came out, and there were young people of color there. And in Phoenix, people were handing these black teenagers, their trays in the food court, because obviously you work for the convention center because we're Unitarian Universalists. And that didn't happen this year, which made me really happy. This year, kind of the touch point was on transgender issues and making sure that when one of the people on the Right Relations Committee is a trans woman, and so she's a man now. So it's trying to keep everything straight, but she goes by her name Barb, but she's Mr. Barb, right? So there are some gaps, and just trying to be perfect. Everyone was just trying to be, and then people are upset. So like Dave was talking about, like when you get angry, you forget to think. So I thought that was really interesting, that there's this whole kind of business, and there's all this business we have to take care of, but then we also have to remember to try to be our perfect selves, the most perfect that we can, while we're doing all of this, and people are heated and really emotional, and it was fabulous.
And to get really specific, and a little bit probably too specific, one of the biggest issues was they turned the men's rooms into gender neutral.
They turned 2 of the men's rooms into gender-neutral men's rooms.
And it was really difficult to figure out, because when you went through to be as inclusive as possible, the urinals were blocked off.
With criminal tape, which might not have been the best.
Yeah.
The best use of criminal tape.
So really confusing at first as to what exactly we were supposed to do and with whom.
But there were signs that say this is a gender-neutral restroom, and so then men were upset, because why aren't the women's rooms also being taped off as gender-neutral? Because men don't understand, as women do. It takes us longer. We're always in line.
I was told this several times when I asked this question.
So it was really neat when you're trying to get close to 5,000 people in this convention center all together, and to be our best selves, how these come up. So that was interesting, though, some of the issues. So I have some numbers that they gave out early on. And so these numbers probably increased a little bit, but I didn't get them from the last night. So there were 4,509 people at the convention center, and this was on the first night. So as I said, it probably had gone up. There were 1,707 delegates from 579 different congregations, 275 youth. Youth were a really big part of it this year. I was really happy to see that. And there were 115 delegates off-site. So Jim, who's doing the moderating, also has to be looking at a computer, because when you vote, and it's interesting because there were, say, 115 delegates off-site voting, and there are 1,700 delegates in the hall. So really, and it never changed. If the delegates in the hall vote for something, okay, we're moving on because it's passed. It doesn't matter if they all vote for no. But there are people that are taking time out of their day, sitting at their computer, to be involved in this. So he had to pause and wait for their votes to tally up, and their votes always matched ours. I watched that. They never crisscrossed. But that was another challenge, is that he'd say, okay, it's passed, and then someone would run up to the procedure mic and say, wait, well, how about the off-site delegates? And then we'd have to wait for the off-site delegates. But he got better
He did.
as it went on. So yes, there were lots of people involved. Do you want to talk about, I was going to say, and Black Lives Matters was such a huge part
Yeah.
of everything we did. It was really amazing. You know, this happened, I guess, a week after the Charleston massacre, so that was on everybody's mind. And something that was really, there's two things. Two
Yeah.
things happened that were really beautiful. One is there was a little bar in the convention center that had big screen TVs. And when President Obama was giving the eulogy, it was being televised. So people just kind of congregated, and there must have been about 200 of us around these televisions. And when he started singing Amazing Grace, everybody started singing it. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful space to be, because I think no matter where I was, I would have started singing it. And I could have been alone in a mall. But it was just really beautiful to have all of us together.
And marriage equality.
Yeah, and then marriage equality happened
Huge.
one morning. And that's when Jan showed the flag, the rainbow flag draping the podium. And we walked into the session, and they said, we're going to start about 45 minutes late because we're going to take time to celebrate this, because UU's been working on this for decades. And they invited all of the same-sex married people to come up.
79 couples.
They didn't fit on the stage, and they kept coming up. It was so beautiful, and everybody was dancing and singing. And a man got up there. He's a reverend in San Francisco, and he said in 1979, a man came to him and said, I want to marry my gay partner. And he said at that time, I guess the zeitgeist, the gays was like, no, marriage is for those people, those losers. We're not going to get married. So it was the first time anybody had ever asked him. So as a UU reverend, the guy comes up and goes, I love him, I want to marry him. He goes, I guess I can marry you.
I can do it.
Sure. And so they had a marriage ceremony, and this man, this reverend who was talking, said that during the ceremony, he just broke down and started sobbing because he started thinking about kind of where they can go and how monumentous this was to actually be able to marry somebody you love, and how incredible it was that this is actually now the law of the land. So everyone said, we're going to take this moment and we're going to celebrate, because we understand that we've got to get back to work because there's so much more, even around that issue of equality. So that was pretty beautiful. Do you want to go on to your stuff?
Sure. You can jump in as well.
Okay.
So, there were a lot of, and just in terms of the breakout sessions and everything else we did, I think the two main themes really were, justice and equality, both in our relationship with each other, as well as, which I thought was really interesting, about capitalism and about how we need to take down the system the way it is now.
So corporations used to have on their agenda profit and to work for the common good. That used to be one of their rules. If you want to be a corporation, you have to work for the common good. And Reagan and Thatcher took that out. So now there is it's just profit. So that's something I learned.
Yeah. So, and it really was truly amazing. Some of the speakers were radical speakers. It wasn't just the discussion of what we should do. It was a significant call to action as to what we should be doing now. And that, I thought, was really moving in a lot. And I don't care what the conversation was. The end of the conversation was, what do we do next? And so that, I think that was a lot of really good information. So a little bit less of the fun stuff. I do want to take a couple minutes, and I'm going to go through just what we discussed, what we passed, just to give you guys an idea of what we wanted to say. So next slide.
And how we voted, because we went there with no guidance, right? You want to be delegate? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're like, wow, so we spoke for y'all. So I hope
That's
you're happy
right.
with
So
how we voted.
hope you enjoyed this.
And maybe next year, if we want to do it, if anybody's interested, we could have a meeting before we went
Sure.
to discuss. And the amendments change, though.
Yeah.
I mean, the what we're voting on changes.
Sure. This is an example. So the overarching statement that we really needed to vote on now was the affirmation that there's a statement of conscience on reproductive justice. And the actual statement is in excess of about 6 pages long, but you can see that on the UUA website. But suffice to say, one of the things that happens in these is there are 27 amendments that were suggested as changes to this, just from the conversation in the first 2 days of this meeting.
And they have little mini assemblies. So this is, they say, we're going to
Yeah.
vote on this, and then people who want to get together and hash it out, word for word, get together for a couple of hours, and then they bring it with all the amendments that we get to vote on to the main body.
Yeah. And within the time time we had to do this, we had 6 that were brought up for discussion. So you had pro and con mic, and then you had procedurals in the middle. And it was a constant stream, pro and con, pro and con. It was amazing how many different points. Now, wasn't pro and con of the entire statement of consciousness. It was line items of what we wanted to see taken in and out. And so this is, voting on keeping it in, taking it out. 2 of those were upheld, and it basically was passed by a majority vote. And I know there was one.
Yeah, so there's one line. So the one line that was really interesting in this is, and you don't have it at all.
I don't have it up here.
So it says we are a diverse faith group, right? And then it says
we don't always agree on everything.
we don't always agree on everything. And then there was a line that was in it that was struck out that said we don't even agree on when life begins.
Right.
Right, or when life begins, and something. There was another thing in there, and then it said, but we agree on this.
Yeah.
So they chose to take that out. First of all, the verbiage was a little bit of the verbiage that anti-choice groups use, like whatever those words were. So they were trigger points, and we'd already said we're diverse, so we don't really need to go into. But that was
a significant
so hotly
amount of
debated.
conversation.
People standing up. And and some people saying, I can't, in all good conscience, vote for this unless that line is in.
And 2 people threatened to leave. The entire
they were
assembly.
going to walk out. Like, people are really
it was.
intense about this.
But one of the things, if you go to the next slide, one of the things, these next 2 slides, just a couple of points. Like I said, everything we did had a statement of action. What do we need to do as a result of this? And even this statement of conscience, can't say it, had a couple of them. And a couple of them that we thought about on the way home about what can we do. And this was one section. It was, what can an individual do? What can a congregation do? What can we as a people do? And one of the ones for the acts for what a congregation can do is invite reproductive justice groups to share the knowledge, to develop and promote congregational statements on reproductive justice. We go to the next slide. The next one is join with state legislative ministry organizations. I mean, there are just so many things that as a congregation. Welcome breastfeeding in our shared spaces. There was actually, and I thought it was beautiful, but even at our panel discussion, one of the panelists was breastfeeding during the panel discussion. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But this is just an idea of some of the things that we could do as a congregation, and there's lots and lots more where that came from.
And there may be somebody who's been to GA and understands a little bit more. So this is something that they've been studying for years.
Yes.
That's what this is.
This is, I think, a 4-year study is what the Statement of Conscience
right. So
comes from.
and so the UUA, like, we support them. So it's our congregation gives money to them to kind of go forward with these. And so this is what they've been studying.
Yeah.
That other thing. This is something new.
Yes.
Please move on.
And yes, I have. Actions of immediate witness. This is something I hadn't understood before. This was brand new to me. And this really, within the congregation, within this meeting, we have the opportunity to bring up to, I think it was 6 different things that we say we need to do immediately. No study. This is something we need to do now.
And you have to get like 99 people to sign on to this. You have a petition, and this is all done like the first 2 days of GA.
Yeah.
So you're like, we need to do this. You get 99 people to sign it. Then it goes to a committee. They choose the 6, and then we vote on 3 of them.
And so we actually went through, and I'm showing you which ones that were brought, which ones we as delegates voted on, and which ones were passed. The first one was supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. That was voted on by the delegates, and it was approved. There was an act for a livable climate. This is interesting. It was something that was really very, very specific about climate change. Very contentious because there were a lot of statements that didn't relate specific to climate change, but talked about reproductive justice and a lot of things.
It's all in.
Yeah,
involved.
and we actually thought as a delegates that it was a little bit too muddled and actually didn't even vote for it, but the UUA Assembly did, and it was approved. They're supporting a framework with a nuclear deal with Iran. Most of us had no idea what we were talking about in this particular one and where we were trying to go with this.
No, we did. That was the one where the guy's like, right now we want to say we're not going to war.
I thought it was a little more muddy than that. I didn't vote for that either. The other was calling for an end to the I can't even joke, the conversion therapy. This was something that the youth had championed. They created
so
this
like
specific
100
immediate
of them
action.
went up to the microphone, and there's one who's the delegate, and she was the spokeswoman.
And it was amazing.
I voted for that just because the youth. It didn't pass.
Yeah.
But that was one that I voted for because the youth all
Absolutely.
stood up for it.
It was amazing. In the immigration of child and family detention centers now. Yes, come on. You voted and approved.
Yeah, that was.
And then solidarity with Illumination, which is this is a Native American. This was a really interesting one. There is one of the largest coal mines in the country.
They're going to build.
Are going to build it on their sacred land.
On land that we gave them in a treaty 150 years ago.
And they're actually going to court with the federal government saying, we have this paper that's a signed treaty, and the government is saying, sorry, we're going to sell the mineral rights out from under you, and it's going to be built on your sacred land.
And this was these were the people that we did our action. We had a witness action to support these people.
And interestingly enough, it was not passed.
And I voted for it because we had a witness, like they were our guests there to witness them. So I thought that we should support them, and it didn't pass. So yeah, we didn't always vote the same way, which was funny sometimes because when we were calling for more time, and they'd have to add time. So when you're getting down, they'd be like, okay, we want to add 10 more minutes. And people like, are we going to vote on adding 10 more minutes? And one time I'm like, yeah, ooh, sorry. So I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, Greg. And he goes, no,
I want to vote.
I was just like, Greg, you're forgetting to put. He's like, no. Yeah. So we did not always vote the same.
One of the other proposed bylaws changes to the bylaws that made neutral regarding the government structure in districts and regions. Part of this is the fact that we have the
Church of the Larger
Church of the Larger Fellowship that is not being considered in any of these discussions because they don't have a physical region.
Yeah.
So this was a really important. I think everybody was pretty much unanimous about the need for that. If you go to the next one, a couple of additional proposals. The campaign finance reform.
I had no idea that the president. They had to put a limit of $100,000 if you want to be president of the UUA. You can't spend more than $100,000
$100,000 for campaigning.
What? Yeah, so that shocked me.
And so one of the things that we had to do was they asked us, they wanted to include all of the kind of elected or appointed positions, including the speaker, the moderator. And the moderator says, I think I spent like $200.
No, 20,000. They were saying 20,000.
It was 20,000, but again,
it shocked me.
They wanted to make this universal saying, no matter how you're appointed, the maximum you can spend was $100,000. And we all said, no. If there's a ceiling lower than that now, please leave that.
Yeah, but we voted for that.
So that was voted and passed. Making the Commission of Appraisal Committee a board of trustees, a little bit more complicated. Basically, the commission right now is an elected independent review board. The proposal was to make them part of the board.
No, to make them, the board chooses who's going to be on that committee.
Yeah.
And that got a lot of people talking back and forth because people were like, we need to protect ourselves from our board. And then another youth got up and said, but aren't we all the UUs? Like, doesn't the board work for us? But there was this kind of adversarial,
very much.
Do we want the board to actually be telling who's going to be actually being the independent appraiser? So that was voted down.
Yeah.
Like that was by a majority.
And then the last one was a change to the finance leadership on the board of trustees. This I thought was really interesting as well. I didn't realize that the financial committees are actually just select members of the board right now. And so they independently, this subgroup, make a decision, recommendation, or actually not even a recommendation, they decide
with the financial
advisor. And they said, the financial advisor came to the microphone and spoke and said, no, actually, why don't we just make the whole board this? I'll make the advisory, the board decides. And everybody kind of looked at each other and said, well, that makes a lot more sense than what we're doing it now. Yes, let's pass that.
So all the board is responsible for everything.
And then one more, last slide. There were just a couple of clarifications. Some of them, and this is where we had a lot of discussion, one of the points was, in one of the proposals, was the abolition of prisons. That was the full statement. And a lot of discussion on this. It was like, well, we don't want to get rid of them all.
It's the abolition of the prison system, which actually means we need to reform our prison system.
And so that was the move.
People got really upset about the word abolition.
Yeah. And then the last one was just points concerning immigration reform.
Yeah, so it was so much fun and so exhausting and so much fun, right?
But yeah, I mean, I do think, I think the biggest eye-opener to me was the fact that there was so much debate. But if you think about it, who makes up the UUs, where we come from, our general background, it's not that surprising when you see 20 people on the pro, 20 people on the con. For one thing, you say, this just makes common sense. Why are we discussing this? It's the point of view that needs to get across. And I think that was what we had the most of. Good?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Extinguish this flame knowing the light remains in the warmth and compassion of our hearts until we are together again. Our closing words today are by Laura Lynn Bellamy. If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help one another that they may come true. If you have known love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world. Go in peace. Shalom, salam, namaste, and blessed be.